The chain around Fernanda Lopez's ankle was still warm from someone else's skin when she woke up in the locked room, understanding with perfect clarity that she traded one kind of prison in Honduras for another in Tijuana. 23 years old, alone in a Mexican border town, she believed a well-dressed man who promised safe passage to America had handed over her life savings of $4,000 to someone who spoke of helping young women like family, who showed photos of success stories, who radiated the kind of paternal concern she'd been missing since her father's murder. Now she lay on a mattress that smelled of other women's tears, listening to whispers in the darkness that confirmed her worst fears. She'd been sold, not saved. But to understand how a university-educated woman with a degree in marketing ended up chained in a Tijuana safe house, you need to go back 6 months to the day Honduras became impossible to survive. The gang had given her 72 hours. Join their organization in whatever capacity they decided, or face the consequences they'd already demonstrated on her neighbor. Fernanda had seen what remained of women who refused, if they were lucky enough to remain at all. At 23, with her whole life planned out in careful steps, she was being offered a choice between becoming property or becoming dead. Her mother had sobbed when Fernanda announced her decision to leave. They'd already lost her father to the violence, gunned down for refusing to pay protection money at a small electronic shop. Now they were losing their daughter to the northern exodus that had already claimed cousins, neighbors, entire families who sent back money and carefully edited stories of American success. Fernanda had saved methodically for 2 years, knowing this day might come, working at a call center by day, tutoring English at night, selling everything that wouldn't fit in a backpack. For $1,000 accumulated dollar by dollar, hidden in places even her mother didn't know. Enough, she hoped, for safe passage and a star in Los Angeles where a friend from university had promised to help. The journey through Guatemala and Mexico had been an education in vulnerability. Buses where women sat together for protection. Checkpoints where money changed hands while eyes stayed downcast. Cheap hotels where you barricaded doors and slept in shifts. By the time she reached Tijuana, Fernanda's money was depleted by half, her faith in humanity worn thin by constant vigilance. That's when she met Carlos at the Migrant Resource Center near the border. He was different from the obvious coyotes who prowled the shelters like wolves. Well-dressed in pressed khakis and a polo shirt, speaking educated Spanish with just enough English mixed in to suggest success. He was volunteering, he said, helping serve meals to migrants because he'd once been in their position. Now he owned a small logistics company, using his success to give back. He noticed Fernanda, reading an English novel while waiting for food, struck up a conversation about literature, education, the challenges facing young professionals trying to cross. His interest seemed genuine, respectful, the kind of networking that had served her well in university. When he learned about her marketing degree, he mentioned contacts in Los Angeles, possible internships, legitimate paths to employment. Over several days, Carlos became a friend. He never pushed, never immediately offered services like the aggressive coyotes. Instead, he shared meals, introduced her others he supposedly helped, painted a picture crossing that seemed both realistic and achievable. When Fernanda finally asked about possibilities, he seemed almost reluctant to discuss business. The plan he outlined was sophisticated. No dangerous desert crossings or river swims. He had contacts at the port of entry, documents that would pass basic scrutiny, a system for moving educated professionals who could blend into American society. It wasn't cheap, for $1,000, but that covered everything including safe housing on both sides, transportation to Los Angeles, even job placement assistance. Fernanda hesitated. For $1,000 was everything she had, leaving nothing for emergencies. But Carlos showed testimonials on his phone, connected her with a woman who'd crossed 6 months earlier and now worked in marketing in San Diego. The woman confirmed everything via video call. Carlos's reliability, the smooth crossing, the job assistance that actually materialized. It seemed too good to be true, but sometimes good things happen to good people. She paid him 3 nights later, counting out bills in the back office of the restaurant where he'd suggested they meet. Professional, safe, witnesses around. He provided receipts, contact numbers, detailed instructions. She'd stay at a partner's house the night before crossing, then move through the port of entry with documents he'd provide. Simple, safe, successful. The house where they took her seemed legitimate at first. Nice neighborhood, clean rooms, other women preparing to cross. The matronly woman who ran it spoke of her own daughters, how she understood the fear and excitement of new beginnings. Fernanda was given a private room, a luxury after weeks of shared spaces, and told to rest well for tomorrow's journey. She woke to darkness and the sound of electronic locks engaging. The room that had seemed welcoming at night revealed its true nature in harsh morning light. Bars on windows painted to look decorative. A door that locked from outside. A camera in the corner she hadn't noticed before. And around her ankle, a GPS monitoring device like those used for house arrest. Its red light blinking accusation. The matronly woman's demeanor had changed completely. No more motherly concern, just business-like efficiency as she explained Fernanda's new situation. The $4,000 had been a down payment. The full cost of crossing was $20,000. Until paid, Fernanda would work off the debt through various services the organization provided. The ankle monitor ensured compliance. The locks ensured no misunderstandings. When Fernanda demanded to speak to Carlos, to explain the obvious mistake, the woman laughed. Carlos was a recruiter, nothing more. He found educated women who could serve specific client needs. The marketing degree was valuable, not for corporate America, but for helping the organization appeal to certain demographics. She'd work in her online operations, creating content, managing social media, all the digital marketing skills applied to selling services she didn't want to think about. The other women in the house confirmed the nightmare. Some had been there months, working off debts that grew rather than shrank through creative accounting. They spent days creating fake testimonials, managing dating profiles, conducting video calls with potential victims. Carlos had recruited them all with variations of the same story. The helpful volunteer, the sophisticated crossing plan, the promises of professional employment. Fernanda's marketing mind recognized the elegant cruelty of the system. Use educated women to recruit other educated women. Create authentic-seeming testimonials because the victims themselves were forced to perform them. Build trust through weeks of relationship development. It was multi-level marketing applied to human trafficking, each victim becoming an unwitting recruiter for the next. The work was soul-destroying. Writing stories of successful crossings while chained to a desk. Video calling other desperate women to confirm Carlos's lies while someone off-camera monitored every word. Creating social media profiles for fictional success stories using photos of women who'd long since disappeared into worse situations. Every day deepening her complicity in the system that had trapped her. They were fed adequately, not physically abused, allowed to move within the house during work hours. The organization understood that visible bruises made poor marketing materials. Instead, they used debt, threats to family back home, the ankle monitors that would alert police if removed. Psychological chains stronger than physical ones. Fernanda learned the house's routines, its weaknesses. The night guard who drank himself unconscious by 3 a.m. The bathroom window with bars that had rusted through at the base. The elderly woman who delivered groceries and seemed uncomfortable with what she saw. She planned carefully, knowing she'd have one chance at most. 3 weeks into her captivity, opportunity arrived in the form of a police raid, not on their house but nearby, some drug operation that had nothing to do with them. But the chaos, sirens, and helicopter overhead sent the guards into panic. The drunk one abandoned his post entirely. The matronly woman focused on destroying evidence. For 20 minutes, the house's security failed. Fernanda kicked through the rusted bars with strength born of desperation. Squeezed through a window barely large enough for her frame. Dropped into an alley that smelled of garbage and freedom. The ankle monitor started shrieking immediately, but she was already running, barefoot and bleeding, toward the sound of traffic and witnesses. She found sanctuary in a 24-hour laundromat where a kind woman let her use a phone. Called the only number she'd memorized, her mother in Honduras. Sobbed out enough of the story for her mother to understand she was alive but not safe. Her mother contacted a cousin in Tijuana, someone Fernanda hadn't even known existed, who came to collect her within the hour. The cousin, Roberto, asked no questions about the ankle monitor he cut off with bolt cutters, the blood on her feet, the terror in her eyes. His own migration story, she'd learn later, included its own chapters of horror. He simply took her to his small apartment, let his wife tend her wounds, gave her a safe place to collapse. Fernanda spent a month recovering, physically and mentally. Roberto's family absorbed her without question, understanding that some stories were too heavy to tell immediately. She helped around the house, played with her children, slowly remembered what normal human interaction felt like. But she couldn't forget the other women still in that house, still creating fake testimonials, still deepening the trap for others. She reported everything to authorities, despite Roberto's warnings about involvement with police, gave them addresses, names, details about the operation. They took her statement with the bored efficiency of people who'd heard similar stories too often. A raid might happen, they said, or the house might be empty when they arrived. The operation moved to another location. These networks adapted faster than law enforcement could respond. The American dream that had driven her from Honduras lay in ruins. Her money was gone, her faith in people shattered. The border that had seemed crossable with the right help now looked like an insurmountable wall. She was free but trapped in Tijuana, unable to go forward to America or backward to the death threats waiting in Honduras. She found work eventually in the maquiladora, one of the four-known factories that lined the border. The pay was subsistence level, the work mindless, but it was honest. She moved into a shared room with other women, all with their own stories of attempted crossings and spectacular failures. Together, they formed a makeshift family of the stranded. Carlos still operated. She learned from new arrivals, still volunteering at resource centers, still recruiting educated women with promises of sophisticated crossings. The police raid had found an empty house. The operation warned in time to relocate. The women she left behind were presumably creating testimonials from some new location, deepening the digital trap that would catch others. Sometimes Fernanda saw her own story reflected in new arrivals at the resource center. Young women with degrees and dreams, talking to well-dressed men who promised safe passage. She tried to warn them, but hope was stronger than caution. They saw her factory uniform and minimum wage existence and assumed her warnings came from jealousy rather than experience. The marketing skills that should have launched a career were now used to spot predators and their techniques. She volunteered at legitimate aid organizations, teaching other women to recognize the warning signs, the too helpful stranger, the sophisticated plans that seemed too good, the testimonials that felt rehearsed because they were. Small acts of resistance against the system that had nearly consumed her. A year later, Fernanda still lived in Tijuana, still worked at the maquiladora, still woke, sometimes with phantom weight around her ankle. The border remained uncrossed, the American dream deferred indefinitely. But she was alive, free, unbroken despite the attempt to shatter her into compliance. She'd learned the hardest lesson about trust in desperate times. That predators wore many faces, spoke educated Spanish, showed genuine seeming concern. That sophistication could mask cruelty more effectively than obvious aggression. That sometimes the most dangerous person was the one who promised to help, who built relationships before revealing their true nature. The smuggler had told her to trust him, had built that trust over days of conversation, shared meals, careful grooming disguised as friendship, had sold her not to another smuggler, but to a system that consumed educated women and converted them into weapons against others like them. She'd escaped the chains, but carried the knowledge that somewhere, women were still creating testimonials with guns pointed at their heads, still recruiting others into the same trap. Fernanda López had paid $4,000 to be sold in a border town, had trusted someone who specialized in trust destruction, had escaped through rusted bars and luck, but lost her faith in crossing, in strangers, in the possibility that good things happen to good people trying to find better lives. She lived now between worlds, unable to return to Honduras, unable to reach America, building a life in the margin between countries. The marketing degree gathered dust while she assembled electronics for pennies. The English she'd tutored others and served mainly to understand the American supervisors who managed the factory. The dreams that had driven her north had been replaced by simpler goals. Safety, honest work, the ability to sleep without chains. Sometimes she passed a house where she'd been held, now operating as something else, or perhaps the same thing with better concealment. The windows still had bars painted to look decorative. The lock still worked only from outside. And somewhere in Tijuana, Carlos was sharing a meal with another young woman, building trust he would eventually sell, creating another link in a chain that connected desperation to exploitation. The smuggler had told her to trust him. She had. That trust had cost everything except her life, which she reclaimed through rust and luck and the kindness of strangers who asked no questions. She was free, but forever marked by the 3 weeks when she'd been merchandise, creating lies to trap others, learning that the border's greatest dangers weren't walls or deserts, but the people who promised to help you cross them for $1,000. 3 weeks in chains. A lifetime of looking over her shoulder. That was the price of trusting the wrong person in a border town where desperation was currency, and trust was the most expensive thing you could give away. Fernanda had paid it all and escaped with only her life, building what she could from the ruins of dreams that had been sold before she'd even known they were for sale.